exactly the point. That gender is not only about women. And I'm also very glad to see that even in the audience today, we don't have only women, but we also have men. Because I think that gender is really about women and men working together for gender equality. Gender equality, as I would imagine you already know, is very much prominent in development, being national development or international development. And as you know, there is a standalone goal in the Millennium Development Goals that are going to end next year. There are already a lot of discussions in the international community on how the next round of development goals will look like, what's called the post-2015 agenda. And it's very clear that gender will be one of the priority of the next round that likely is going to be called Sustainable Development Goals. Gender will be very central, and as a UN Women we are hoping to have gender both mainstream in whatever goals there will be, but also as a standalone goals. So both mainstreaming but also standalone. Now, as an evaluation community, this is I think is a very good news. But on the other side, the question for us is how do we get prepared to evaluate policies, programs, projects, strategies, interventions that are gender responsive. And I would even push the question in the frontier more, because at the UN, not only UN Women, I'm also vice chair of the UNEC, that is the UN Evaluation Group, that is the network that is putting together the Director of Evaluation Office of 43 different UN agencies. And so as UNEC, as network of the UN agencies, we are saying that for us, human rights and gender responsive is key to whatever the UN is doing. So even for interventions that are not specifically designed for gender, we are saying that even for those interventions, our evaluation approach should be anyway human rights and gender responsive. So not only for intervention designed for gender, but for any development intervention. So we hope that with the panel that we have today, we will be able to get some inspirations, some experience and skills on how to address this challenge, that is, how to make sure that our evaluation practice, our evaluation theories are gender responsive. So today we are going to have a quite rich panel. In principle, here we have listed 5 people. Mr. or Mrs. Hillenbrand is here. So I think we have 4 people. Nusa Kabore was in a meeting with me. I hope he's coming just in the next 5 minutes. So my proposal is we have 1.5 hours. I would propose we have 1 hour for the presentation and question and answer, and we keep half an hour for more general discussions. So my proposal is that we go with the presentation 10 minutes. We open up only for clarification questions, and then we open up the general discussion at the end of the 3 presentations. So our first presenter is Florence Etta. I'm sure that the majority of you already know her. She has been also is a past president of AfrEA. Here today she is as a vice president of AGDEN, that is the African Evaluation Network for Gender Responsive Evaluations. And she is also the executive director of T.Y. Danjuma Foundation in Nigeria. So with this, Florence, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marco. We are supposed to have that, but I'm not sure. Yeah? You can't hear?
So perhaps come here.
Yes.
Come here if you want to. just avoid a big fire in the convention center.
Okay, so I hope we can see. So next, oh, I can do that.
Yeah, you can do it. I forgot my backpack with the laptop inside. I just go downstairs to take it because...
By all means. And my system is frozen.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'll just go on.
You have a different now,
Yeah.
no? So go on and try to see if it can.
Okay, welcome to this presentation. I'll try and raise my voice, but we have competitions. So we're going to try and lower our voice, but hopefully you can hear me, right? Good. So this presentation is basically talking about what we call the AGDEN approach. AGDEN is the African Gender and Development Evaluators Network. You would probably see a flyer on your seats somewhere there about AGDEN. AGDEN was started in 2002 by AfrEA and UN Women. So there we are. It's working now, thank you. And the whole essence of the network is an Africa-wide network, as you see. Basically, the mission is to foster accountability, social justice, and equitable development through assuring and ensuring that evaluations are gender equality responsive as well as human rights sensitive. So that's the major thing we were supposed to do. Just a brief history, since I have only 10 minutes. Very, very brief. The first 2 years we were basically as a project of the UN Women. Actually, the project was handled by another impressive African woman, Zenda Ophir, who was another one-time president of AfrEA. And after that, that first phase got created as a network. Second phase, 2004 to 2007, was when we're basically establishing, we created a secretariat in Nairobi, Kenya, and gathered the first core group of 24 members. We actually had our first meeting at the 2004 AfrEA conference in Cape Town. A very memorable event. Yes, for those of you who were there. How many were there? Oh wow, okay, good, 4, not bad. And after that, in the first phase, we worked basically on trying to understand ourselves and our roles. Well, few were 24, but that's what we did. And we created, in that period, working with UN Women, the first gender-sensitive indicators for the Paris Declaration, and generated a framework, what we call the Gender Equality Accountability Framework, that was supposed to be working with the Paris Declaration. I shan't tell you the story, but we'll get down to it. 2008, 2010, we thought we were just coming into our own. We started working in a new area, where initially we started out as basically gender responsive. Then in 2008, we got into your struggling. Okay. You're trying to cut out the other? Okay. 2008, we got money from the Ford Foundation to concentrate on human rights. That's when we started working on human rights, trying to integrate 3 principal areas of development: gender and development, monitoring and evaluation, and human rights. So that was quite a mouthful. And by the end of 2010, we had developed the first sets of what we call knowledge products. And we were now ready to share with the rest of the world. And since then, that's what we're struggling to do. So, this is just some of the stuff I talked about that we have done. Point number 3, a toolkit on gender and human rights responsive M&E. That's really the crux of what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the how many minutes I have. Yeah? Okay. This is all the background to the project. The Ford Foundation Office at the time was struggling with its human rights programs, trying to show results. So they came to AGDEN to say, okay, how can you help us? So we developed a program, a project, which had three basic parts. One was a study to understand how evaluators understand or are unskilled in human rights and evaluation and gender and development. So the first part of it was this study. And I just very, very briefly go, the rationale was to be able to do better evaluations that are going to be transformative, you have to not only understand gender and development and the whole area of gender and development, you must understand how to integrate human rights in such a way as to use them both to evaluate projects, whether or not the projects are particularly women's projects, gender projects, or any projects for that matter. So that's why we thought, let's see if the skills are available. And so we did the study. We had, this is just a brief, 30 face-to-face interviews in Kenya with members of the CSO, staff, M&E, non-M&E, 8 online respondents across the continent, because we have a network that is virtual. So, and that was very disappointing. It was supposed to be a virtual study. So when we had only 8, we had to quickly change strategy to get the other people. So that's basically the sample size we had. We asked a few questions. These figures just show very, very briefly what we had in terms of responses. One was, do you have M&E staff in your organization? Do you have a function, somebody in the function of an M&E person? Yeah? And we saw that for 73% of the respondents, yes, they had. It wasn't always a full person, but there was always an M&E function that was designated, attached to one person or half a person or half a his or her time. So there was an understanding that M&E was important for 73% of the organizations that responded. When we asked whether there were commissioners, managers, or something, because it's important. Okay. So that was the distinction we got. But here, we asked about whether or not they consider their organizations human rights organizations. 81 said yes, and 19 said no. But most of them were not necessarily labeled as human rights. What they were doing, their programming, was basically trying to assure that people had their rights at least maintained or respected. So in a sense, there was a large number of them that had major roles in M&E. Here we try to understand, in this figure, basically how much knowledge or formal training people had in various rights subjects, we call them. We talked about gender and development. Blue is yes, I don't know if you can see. And whether you're colorblind or not, the other one that looks a bit like red, mauve, is no. So, how much? The point here is gender budgeting seemed really high. This was East Africa, don't forget, the rest of Africa was only a few. Mostly East Africa, yeah? So what we found was that the rights-based approach had more no's than yes. Human rights, more no's than yes. Gender and development, you expect that to be, this is East Africa, hello, Nairobi hosted one of the conferences. More yeses than no's, yeah? So, familiarity with the concept. The other one was training, this was familiarity. Sometimes you get training, but you still don't think you have a grasp of the concepts. So these are some of the concepts. Again, we had a great bit of a spread. Just to say, the difference here was that we got very low scores in the low 40s in terms of familiarity for any of the skills. So even if they were, they had gotten training, they didn't still feel that they were strongly familiar with the skills. So we saw that there was a widespread understanding of an M&E function in organizations. Little M&E training, high levels of awareness of human rights in terms of in relation to what they were, even though they were low. the concepts where we needed to formally train people on understanding and using the concepts, human rights. And basically this was the beginning of our work, we said. It's like a baseline. So what was the problem we were trying to deal with? As AGDEN, we wanted better results, better transformation results from programming. Whether you were an evaluator or not. If you're in development practice, we just wanted you to understand how to do programming using the tools and skills that have been developed to just make sure that we have better results. So, we have spent between 2006 to now to develop this approach. We have trained in many venues, and each training is for us a learning exercise. We go and we tweak a little thing, we go and we add a little thing, and we remove something, or we add something. And so here we are today, just giving you what we call the tip of the iceberg, the AGDEN approach to planning, monitoring, and evaluation. And that approach has one assumption and two major principles. Yeah? The assumption is that all the people involved in development action are genuinely committed to equity and equality and transformational development. But that cannot always be taken for granted. The truth is, even though we would like as AGDEN to take that as an assumption, it's not always the case. And it really doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man. But this is what we would like it to be. That you cannot have development unless you're truly committed to the development of both men and women. The principles of the AGDEN approach, the first principle is that the entire program cycle needs to be responsive to both human rights and gender equality, not just the evaluation. Therefore, we are saying as AGDEN that you have to start from the beginning of the program planning. Think about the gender equality principles and human rights. If you don't start there, you're not going to be able to find them very well at the end of the program when you start evaluating. You've got to think about them. And what we found in one of our workshops was, we said to people, so are they in your concept notes, in your products, in your program documents? They're like, yes, they're usually there. And what we did was a participatory type thing where we had the thing, just say yes or no, and we're all looking this way. People went to tick yeah in the concept. Then we turned around and said, okay, let's analyze this. It was a participatory evaluation. Let's analyze these results. Oh, 70% of you said they're in your concept notes, but then 30% said they're not. You don't do it. Why? What's going on here? 1 minute, okay. Later, yes. Second principle is that the integration of human rights principles, standards, and key notions, non-negotiables, from the areas of feminism, gender development, and human rights must be in the evaluation. Now that's a tricky part. I've skipped a lot of things. This is the major thing I want to talk about. So this is a table where we call, this is the analytical frame. And in this place, what we have done is crystallize the standards from human rights, the key notions and non-negotiables from feminist and feminist theory, and even notions of, in what we call, not the human rights-based approach only, but human rights perspective. Yeah? And then, of course, we use the evaluation criteria because we're looking at an evaluation. How do you do this in an evaluation? What we have suggested, the key suggestion here is using this frame, we are suggesting that you pair the OECD DAC criteria with what we have called the principles and standards coming out of these two other areas in your questions, the evaluation questions. We try to train this, and whenever we get to this point, we lose people. We lose people because if you have not done an evaluation, you cannot understand the stable. Yeah? And what I have found is that in evaluations, TORs, for the past 5 years, I have not been able to find 10 questions that respond to this set of issues. I found an evaluation too October 2013 that had 2 questions. I had a human rights thing that I could say, but very few. So what are we saying in this table? We're saying we have done all the elimination and the pairing and the tidying up and the marrying. The empowerment, participation, non-discrimination, accountability, those are the things we say that are non-negotiable from both human rights and women's feminist theory and women's gender development. These are the things we want to see. And down here are the things the OECD DAC suggests are the things you should be looking for in using to frame your evaluation questions. So we're saying marry these two and make sure that you have questions that reflect them. So when you're asking a question about relevance, we're saying the relevance of the empowerment. You're doing empowerment. Is it relevant to reduce the nature of gender relations? That's what we're really asking. The relevance is not necessarily an education project. Let's assume we have an education project for making beads. Yeah, bead making. And somebody says, yes, this particular area is really, really poor, you know, the women are suffering, the farmers, blah, 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 yeah. At the end of the project, 5 years, 2 years, even 12 months, the women are making beads, absolutely fantastic beads, and selling the money, but they're getting beaten at home. The husband, they're giving the husbands the money. So, of what relevance is that money to their personal empowerment and the relations? That's what we're saying. Yeah? So we're saying pair these issues. The last one, sustainability, we're saying we don't want it paired, we just want each of these issues actually evaluated on the basis of sustainability. At the end of 12 months, you've done that. So what about 3 years? What about 5 years when you come back? What would happen? So each of these things. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the contribution I've been making. These are challenges of the association.
So you have 30 seconds.
Yes, I'm done.
Do you believe her?
No, these challenges are challenges of the network in terms of the work we have done so far. Resistance is heavy, ladies and gentlemen. Resistance to... I was at the meeting at a place that shall remain nameless, but a very, very important place. And we tabled the 20 Paris Declaration gender-sensitive indicators that were generated to mirror the original Paris Declaration indicators. And the suggestion from AGDEN was you adopt some, or it really was you adopt some. No, there are too many. No, there are too many. In one short message, that entire work was killed. There are too many. So, fatigue, maybe. There's no money. Fatigue with gender, and that's because people are still thinking gender is woman. But gender is both of us, or all of us, depending on how we craft this thing called gender. Funding is a major issue. We have UN Women to thank. They'll be the only sole providers of AGDEN money. No, not sole. Ford Foundation. Yes. It's still a small group. You see there, we are only 100 since 2002. And the reason is because we have specialized skills. You have to have understanding of human rights. You have to have gender and development and M&E. But the good news is that if you have any one of them, we're happy to have you as a member. So far, we're mostly virtual. We only meet when we have AfrEA conferences. That's why it's very important for AGDEN members to be supported, to be here, so we can share and talk about what we're doing. Just a few questions to leave with you. I shan't read them, and I'm not doing anything else. To say if you're doing similar work, please let's comment. Thank you very much.